We will call to order the School Subcommittee of the Whole Advisory Committee at 5:37 on January 30th. Roll call, please. Gina Stino?
Present.
Ellen Mar?
Present.
Mary McGoldrick is present. All right, and I will be scribbling notes to Ellen so we can figure out, we can mush them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All righty, so enrollment.
Yes, so again, thank you for having us here. If I just to go over enrollment, what we used is a couple of sources to provide the answers for this. First off, obviously, we know what we have right now based on Aspen. And we have that for this year, and then we have some projections from NASDAQ that we have that pretty closely jibe with where we are. But obviously, you know, sometimes an accurate measure is to look at what you have now and to kind of project it forward a year in many cases, but it's not always that way. So
Sure, can I interrupt you really quickly, Patrick? If
Sure.
you're comfortable, just so in terms of the notes that I'm taking, can you forward the responses to us after the meeting? Is that acceptable?
yeah,
Okay.
we're completely comfortable.
Okay, cool.
And, you know, if something comes up here that, you know, we obviously are trying to be as accurate as possible, that there's some inaccuracy, we'll just consider that and correct it as we need to. But, you know, this is absolutely, I'll send this over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So you see that we have, you know, we broke it down by grade level, by school, and then obviously by the district as requested.
Mhm.
And then in terms of FY 25 and 26, excuse me one second. Oh, you know, I think I have Lance coming on here. I'm gonna promote him. Hold on. This is like, you know, chewing bubble gum and walking at the same time or whatever. Hold on. Promoting him to panelist. Okay, so he'll be coming on in. All right. And then in terms of, I'll try to make this a little larger so we can see it.
There we go.
All right, Lance, you with us?
Now I feel like part of the team.
Hi, Lance, how are you?
There we are. Hello. I can hear and be heard and see and be seen. Sorry about that. I tried this from a different computer a moment ago and it did not pan out.
Not
So
to worry. So we're just on
So-
question one.
Trying to give everyone a kind of a hard screen to control, but so this just shows some of the enrollment figures. Can you see this large enough for you to see on the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
But you can get a sense for kind of where we're going, and rather than trying to do all the math here, the next slide has sort of, because obviously the question here is where we're going with enrollment. This just shows it. I get too big here. Excuse me. Just gotta move. So this just shows you the year-to-year combos. Obviously, you know, PK to 2, 3 to 5. And then if you go down here, this shows the percentages. So it can really show you how our population in terms of the schools are projected to be growing. And you can see it decreases ever slightly, flattens out, and then starts to increase as we go, you know, 10 years out. And that's what NASDAQ does. And, you know, they continually re-explore this equation, but that's sort of where we are, you know, sort of leveling and then maybe increasing as we get into the late 2020s and early 2030s. And that's strange to even say those numbers. It just seems very odd that we're talking about them, but there they are. So, you know, that was really the first question, was just about what is the projected enrollment by building to district total, and where do you see enrollment going from FY 25 and FY 26? You know, specifically FY 25 and FY 26, there really shouldn't be much movement, except you know, just very slight increases, perhaps. According to in PK to 12, according to NASDAQ, and you know, we're not looking at profound increases over the next couple of years. So I don't know if we wanted to dive deeper into that, and I can focus on anything that this committee would like me to focus on. Ellen has her hand raised. that
Yep.
Mary, I wanna
Go for it.
presume to call on people, but Ellen,
Yep.
you have a question?
Yeah, I have one question. I was trying to jot down the numbers from year to year. Does it look like, so in 8th grade, currently, we have 99 students. And it looks like next year we're projecting 103 in 9th grade. Is that normal to have an increase from 8th to 9th? Don't we have typically some drop off to private school?
So the problem with some of this data is, I think that the high school numbers are actually to date. So, so in other words, we gained some, that was what Brian had. You know what? Those high school numbers are off. I apologize. They
They are, I
because
think they're 2020, I do think.
we
those
took
are
them from
going back. We were
2023.
going back and
Yeah,
forth.
I definitely apologize because I went back to the slides. I just realized they're off. So we're not expecting any major changes. So you're right. It would be 86 for 9th, and then
103.
you kind of,
Okay.
112.
And
yeah, that, so
112
everything's
for
correct
left.
except for the high school.
Okay,
Thank you.
Jean, do you have any questions?
I don't. I saw that and I was kind of surprised. And then I'm looking at enrollment projections by grade and seeing, I know this sounds odd, but how low they are comparatively speaking to 2019 and before that. So it's kind of interesting to see what the numbers look like. And I realize that they go down and then they go up, but that's not for quite some time. So the 15, 26 and 27 are a little bit higher.
Yeah, I mean, if it is 14668, 14. It's a slight increase.
Right. But it was as high as, correct me if I'm wrong, Ellen, I think it was like 16. It was somewhere in the middle 1600s.
Yeah, back in like 2014, 2015. But Mary, I know you'll recall, we had challenges with how the numbers were being reported to DESE
Oh, I remember that
when
too.
they got scrubbed. So I
Yeah.
think in FY17, that's kind of like the benchmark that I look at, because we know that the numbers submitted were true and proper, and students had left the district were scrubbed out and
Yeah,
all of that.
that's,
So it's
that's
1580
actually, I remember that because that was Lily's year.
Yeah, so 1586 was the high in FY17. So I
Yeah.
just have another question. So the total 1435 has 48 in pre-K. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes,
next year, because we want to add another pre-K, Ellen, another class.
right. So because without that, then it's relatively even year over year.
it would be relatively even. Yep,
Yeah.
you're about right. And again, you do the quick math, obviously you're dropping off the 101, 106 becomes grade 12. So, it's slightly less, I think, than what we have here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. That was my error. I looked at our slideshow for the actual presentation and mirrored those numbers and realized that that's current high school. It's not 24.
All right, that's easy to do when you got all these numbers swimming in front of you.
Jean?
Any
Yes.
other questions on our end, Jean?
Yes. Do you have any feel, Patrick, for how many students we might lose at the high school next year?
Moving into the high school for private schools?
Yes.
Not a lot. John hasn't had a good indication that there's Principal Mills hasn't had a good indication. There's a lot of folks who are applying out, nor has Brian. I asked them that question, but they couldn't really quantify it. But there didn't seem to be a huge population that was looking for a private school, but it's really hard to tell
Yeah.
at this point. kind of around the time when people are starting to make those decisions.
Right, okay.
Ellen, are you all set?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Your hand's still up, Ellen.
Oh, so sorry.
Okay, so let's move on.
Okay, so question 2 talks about the basic rollover, and again, which asked was from FY 23, FY 24 as compared to FY 22, 23. The rollover was, and this is FY 22, 23, was 780,732, and that of course includes the stepped reins, longevity stipends. The FY 23 rollover is projected to be 684,604 with the same stipulations and the contract. And the surprise here is that FY 23, 24 is lower than the previous year, especially given the contract. And I know, I mean, my answer would have been that it has a lot to do with who's on the steps, but Sue, I will let you maybe explain that in a little more detail to the group, because I think you could do a better job explaining the context than I could.
Certainly. So, I mean, I crunched the numbers, and I also had the payroll specialist crunch the numbers just to make sure we're on the same page and just rolling everything forward. And what happens is when they hit the top step, so we had 88 staff member at the top step going into 24, but in 23, we had 72.
Okay,
So from 20, and for 23, those 72 people were held there, but then there was a difference of 14 that could still move. So now we've got more people that are held, which means they don't get a jump in step, they just get the cost of living.
right, okay.
I
Figured it was either that or you.
And we had 11, we hired 11 new hires, replacing retirements and resignations that were at the high end of the steps. And, consciously, we try to bring them in at a lower step. So we're not starting at the top. So that's kind of what happened in between the two things, 11 people, someone going out the door might have been a doctor at step 12, and someone coming in door could have been a master step 1. And that's a huge difference in pay.
Sure, no, understood. Okay, easy. Thank you.
And I do have all those numbers in our contract that you probably have as well, if you needed to know what those top steps were. Jean?
No, Jean, go ahead, sorry.
I believe in the budget presentation that you just did, or that you're doing,
Yes.
you anticipate $180,000 in retirements. Do you know how many people off the top of your head that might be? Like how many are?
Yeah. Sorry, Jean, I didn't mean to cut you short, but I think two, three. Right now we have indication, certainly 2 and potentially 3.
All right,
And obviously there are
higher
because
levels.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Ellen, are you good?
Yes.
Okay, super. Let's keep going.
Okay. So number 3 here, we have, this isn't the FTE count. So the question is articulated as the current FTE, that's a full-time employee count is 261.1. Budget is adding 8.5. Is this correct? What is the projected total FTE count from budget, grants, and revolving by area, administration, staff, et cetera, for FY 24? And this is the portion of the programming when I can say that our presentation to school committee is we're still working it through, and we haven't voted on it yet. And one of the things we caught in this that was because as you know, from looking at the presentation, the thought on the table is that potentially we could, with some Chapter 70 reimbursement coming in, create a scenario where we have free full-day kindergarten. And what we didn't indicate in the presentation was the 3.5 FTEs. I know there might be more discussion about what compromises FTEs and all that, but this is clearly not there. The 3.5 FTEs that would be basically handled by that tuition, and now which we'd have to pick up the tuition that we cost. So the answer is not 8.5. And Sue, if I'm wrong, correct me, it's 11.5, correct?
Correct in the sense of depending on which direction we go.
That's
So
right.
if we absorb full day K, we're absorbing the other half of the 3 teachers, which would make it 11.5. If we don't go forward with the full day K, making it free, and we just add 50,000 to help reduce the tuition, then the FT stayed 8.5 increase. It doesn't, it doesn't change that amount.
But your FTEs won't increase because you still have those 3 kindergarten teachers on the payroll. They're still part of the count, even though the funding for them comes from somewhere else.
Yes, so when I look at the FTEs, and I know we talked about this in the past, when I look at the FTEs, I look at the school budget FTEs, and then I look at separating them out. So
Right.
there's 25.5 FTEs coming from revolving
Yeah.
and 13.3 coming from grants.
Right,
So it would be a shift from the revolving to the school budget.
right. So it's not really an increase in FTEs because they're already in the count. They're already accounted for by the town in terms of benefits and OPEB
Yes.
and all of that. So my recommendation is you don't even mention that there'll be a shift of where those FTEs come from because they're already accounted for.
Yeah.
You're not really increasing at 11.5.
Right, no, you're totally correct. It's just when reporting to DESI, I have to break it out like this, so that's kind of how I look at it. School budget, grants, then revolving.
Right, right. And so I love how you do it in the monthly update that you send out, because you articulate it very clearly
Yes.
from each of the 3 buckets, which is the right way to do it. But it always adds up to a total.
Yes,
And the
Right.
town just cares about the total.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
good, that's great. It works in our favor, really.
No, we were just trying to be, make sure we were being transparent with the way we were calculating numbers.
Yes,
That's why we added it, but yeah, thank you, Ellen, for that. And I think Jean has a question. That's
Yeah,
okay.
go
I
ahead.
do. The uninformed or uneducated in school budgets, which obviously I sat in that seat for 9 years. It looks like we've hired 22 people over 2 years, or that we're hiring 22 people over 2 years. So to Ellen's point, it's not that it's a better way, it's just a different way of explaining it. So it
Yeah.
doesn't confuse people who don't know what they're looking at. Does that make sense?
It does.
absolutely. And I can actually articulate that, going forward. Now I know how the town looks at it as a whole.
Right.
If we're adding, just moving it from revolving to school budget or grant to school budget, then the number's not going to change.
And we
Right.
know OPEB's a concern and I understand that. So, we want to make our numbers. We want to make sure we're giving the correct numbers, but we don't want to make it sound like we're doing
Right.
something we're not.
Right.
I get your point. Yeah.
Right, so there's a discrepancy. So question 3, I started it with 261.1, which I took from the December presentation, which shows 222.34 FTEs from the budget. And then 13.3 from grants and 25.5 from revolving. So is the 222.34 in December incorrect?
So the 223.4 that was in December, it was correct at the time. But looking at FY 24 and going forward, we had several positions that are open in 23 that I'm now finding out that we're not filling. So we cut the positions, we didn't fill them. So the number of FTEs did go down.
Okay, so when you present on the monthly, that's the budget number, not the actual number.
Yes. I mean, I can definitely go back and check the numbers
So that's like 6 people. That's a lot.
for
Wow.
December. It was well, we had quite a few ESPs that Barbara Sawanka, the special education director, you know, she went through with her staff to account for, you know, how many ESPs did we have? What were their load, you know, what were their teaching loads or assistant loads look like? Did we need to fill them? Did we not need to fill them? Were they assigned to a student that has now gone away? It was those kinds of things. And so we were like, we don't need them.
And in some cases, they were, you know, people who had left us and then we didn't fill that. And we
Correct.
kinda we looked at the numbers and that was something that we asked Barbara to do. We asked Barbara to really look at our ESPs and to make sure, I mean, obviously ESPs are hired for the most part, instructional ESPs for special education needs in the district. And so we just wanted to really make sure that we had a good sense for what we needed and what we didn't, and that we weren't holding on to staff if indeed it wasn't important or pertinent to have them for our special education needs.
Okay, that's great. So 216.1, that's the operational FTE count.
Yes.
Okay,
Patrick, if you could do a favor,
Of course.
and I think it would be important to include that, if you wouldn't mind including that information about the 6 people that either did not return within this, because that's an important part of the story.
Yes. And that we appreciate that, because again, that's something we've been living with for a while, so we didn't really think that would jump out like that. So thank you.
I mean, you have to, so big, just zooming out for a second, big picture, part of our job on advisory is really to look at head count and bodies and how long we own these people.
Sure.
And I don't mean to reduce staff to that, but it's a real concern.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Other questions on 3? Should we move to 4? Okay. Now, I didn't ask Mrs. Sawanka to join us. So if we need follow-ups with this, we can certainly, get the follow-ups, but I think we have enough information here, particularly from Sue, that can help with the answer. So just to read the question again to everyone, is a total of 300,000 has been appropriated from the stabilization fund for FY23. Using the budget documents we received for the FY23 as a starting point, the December report advises that sped tuition's running at $74,749 deficit. Is that before or after the $100,000 withdrawal from the fund? Sue, you want to answer that first?
So it's neither. So the $100,000 from sped stabilization fund, the Newtown accountant has a different way of looking at the sped stabilization fund. So she created a sped revolving account, and she moved that $100,000 to a spread from sped stabilization to sped revolving. And then we had it was basically a tuition settlement for $100,000 that we had to pay. That was unanticipated.
Any questions on that?
Is that, I hate to say this directly, but is that legal? Because the special, the sped stabilization fund falls under MMA and is quite specific. I wasn't aware you could have a sped revolving fund.
I'm honestly not sure, Ellen. Don Pyatt, the previous town accountant, did it a different way. He put it directly into our budgets to increase the budget. Jen Mullen, the new town accountant, said that's not how it's supposed to be done. So she put it into a revolving.
We're meeting with Ms. Mullen tomorrow. So, as I think this conversation is going to be a bit dynamic and we're going to have to revisit some things, I think maybe we'll bring that up with her. I'll write that down as a note.
Yeah, and if you don't, you should have the policy, because it's directly from MMA, and forgive me, I forget the I forget the legal reference to it, but it's very specific on the floor and the ceiling of the fund and how and when you can take money out. And unless it's changed since we did the policy, a revolving fund was not a component that was part of it. So,
I honestly can't say that I disagree with you. But like I said, that's the direction the town accountants gave to us and how she handled it. I'm
but
not
she might
saying,
not be, she might not be familiar with it. That's all I'm saying. So.
I can pull the policy and bring it with me tomorrow to go over with her.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
good idea. And then, any other questions on that part of it? I'll move to the second part of the question. Okay, so the second part of the question is, it says the December report also advises that I believe it's 117,609.
1 million.
Oh,
It's a
no,
1
sorry,
million.
1 million,
million.
it's right, 117,609 is being rolled over into FY 24, obviously, from the circuit breaker. How is sped being budgeted for FY 24? Increase, decrease, or flat? And the answer, excuse me. Oh, geez. The answer we have there is special education. I'm sorry, it says a student moving programming with an increase in tuition is a natural part of special education services. Special education will increase for FY 24, especially with the predicted percentage increase, 14% in private school tuition. And I believe there are some other questions here about the how many students receive sped services in FY 23. I'll just answer the whole thing. I will say FY 23, FY 22, and plan for FY 2024, FY 24, sorry. Are there out of district residential placements, or are the out of district placements for services we don't offer, can't offer in Cohasset? And
So I can speak to that.
go
So
ahead.
the first part was in the December reporting, or in the last few months, actually. We've been steady at the deficit of 74,749. That was truly based on a child who was in a collaborative who moved to a private. So that's really good news, actually, in a sense that, as Barbara Swank was saying today, some other districts, or many other districts, are already in the minus $600,000 in their sped. So holding at 74, isn't fabulous that we're in deficit, but it could be far, far worse.
Mhm.
And I've seen it worse. I mean, we've seen it worse here.
Oh, no, we all have. I mean,
It doesn't mean it's not gonna get,
It doesn't mean it's not going to change, but at this point, I can honestly say for, I think, November, December, it has not changed. So we're holding that number. And then the special education increase for FY 24, it's predicted. We haven't, had anything final, that private schools increasing by 14%. So we did account for a 14% increase to our private. We also had 7 students that are aging out. So even though tuitions have increased, we have less students, so tuitions decreased in that sense. And then with this increased circuit breaker this year, it's an additional $468,000 that helps offset or balance our budget for next year. Because I mean, this year we're, I think, 700 and something thousand. So next year, we have 1,000,001 to spend on tuition. So it is a savings. So you'll see in some of our reporting that it's going to show, I want to say maybe an $85,000 increase overall in sped tuition. And that, granted, without students being aged out or the increase in circuit breaker, we would have took a big hit with tuitions. They would have skyrocketed.
right. Right.
What
that's-
else?
So that's that recent announcement about circuit breaker that came out, that the
Mhm.
number was going to be higher.
Yes, and they did, the special ed department went through, went to more training for circuit breaker and went through like extensive, I don't want to say nickel and diming, but they accounted for and reported for every minute that every one of our therapists or sped teachers worked on, and it paid off because we got to claim a lot more that we hadn't been claiming in the past. So of course we got a lot more back.
Right, right. So speaking of that, and I'm sorry, Mary, I should have asked to ask a question.
you're fine.
Okay, so in FY 21, we had 220 kids on in our special education program receiving, a variety of services. They were just part of that cohort. And so it's gone up. I don't have FY 22. I think I gave Lance my budget book.
What's
So-
that? We have it right here, actually.
It was
269.
269.
269, yep, and then 250.
Yes,
Which is an increase on a declining population, which I'm gonna guess. Well, so my question is two parts. One, are you, and this is a stupid question, but are you seeing a lot more need because of the pandemic and remote learning? Is that driving some of these numbers?
I don't know, and Leslie.
A little bit, Ellen. Certainly, there are students that aren't making effective progress and we're seeing some deficits. So I think there is a bit of an increase and we're seeing that across the state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a bit of a spike in referrals, correct?
Yeah, we had more referrals from parents, and,
Parents.
you know, and we're looking closely at
Right.
students, right? But there is a criteria for whether, whether they qualify or not, as you all know. So, but yeah, there has been an increase, slight
We've
increase.
also done a lot of work on our MTSS, student
Right.
support, tiered focus, monitoring. But, yeah, I think it does play a role. The pandemic did play a role in bringing some of these matters to kind of a, a point where.
It does. And the social emotional piece, you know, that
Right.
there's been an increase in that for sure. So.
Right.
It's a good
So
question.
kind of leads to my second question. So I didn't see in any of the, the requests, any increase in OT or PT. I mean, we went through back when I was on the committee, we were adding 0.2,
Yeah.
to OT and adding 0.3. I mean, we were scrounging to get, decimal points of FTEs to help for services. And
Mhm.
with an increase in the numbers here, you're not seeing that need.
We're seeing it in academics and we're seeing it in social emotional
Okay.
more
I mean,
so.
the therapeutic program, which we're trying to grow, we did ask for and gain a middle school position during the year. And that's reflected in the numbers we've given you, but that's part of building a therapeutic program. There's a real need there, and that will, in the long run, we believe, help us reduce outplacements. So it's another, it's a short-term investment that I think will have long-term monetary value for us,
Thank you.
of course. Other questions? Did I lose somebody? Did they
No,
hear?
I think we're all still here.
Okay, good. All right, shall we move to, did we cover all of this question?
Yes.
And Pat, just to speed us along, I think we can probably assume that this diligent group has, read the questions and, understands them and got the answers. So we might just see if there's anything we want to just present, just to kind of keep things moving forward.
We'll do, good point. So the next one was about revolving funds and grants.
yes. So I wasn't quite sure what you meant by offsets. So I took it as, what are we using grants and revolving to pay for that we don't pay for this out of the school budget? But I'm not sure that was exactly what the question was.
Goodness.
Yeah, back in the old days when we used to do the budget on, a chisel and stone, we would have a minus line for the grants, so athletics costs, say, $500,000 minus $250,000 from revolving.
Got it. Okay. So I did somewhat answer it. So, I mean, our grants this year is $794,000. So that definitely that supports some of those FTEs that we saw, and other programming and contracted services. We can't really anticipate what we will get next year. Most of the SPED grants increase by little bleeps and blips. Metco usually increases little bits at a time. Title I, unfortunately, is slowly dwindling away. So that's really the only grant that we see decreasing, but they haven't put out any allocations on what we're actually going to get next year. So I'm assuming it might be a little bit more than what we're looking at right now. But part of that will be a decrease in Title I, I'm sure.
Yeah, as you know, we're always, it always depends on how close we are to that percentage, which affords us a large amount or a very little amount. I know, Ellen, you're very aware of that. And unfortunately, we've been on the wrong side of that. So we've really had to absorb most of the the cost of what we used to use our Title I for in terms of staffing.
Yeah, we have one staff member currently paid out of the Title I grant, and she's gone from, I think, we started at maybe a 1.0, and now I think we're funding, the grant only funds like a 0.6. So next
I
year,
think-
probably only,
And before you got here, so we used to be able to fund even more than that.
so slowly it's going down. And, you know, it goes down and then that staff member's salary goes up. So the FTE piece goes down of what we're supporting in the grant. And then for the revolving, as best as I could estimate, at a minimum, 908,000. You know, I can account for regular transportation, regular kindergarten, I can cafeteria, those kinds of things, you know, just the basic salaries. But some of the things that are paid out of the revolving are still ongoing, like sports referees. I have no clue between now and June what or how many we'll have. I guess it depends. Really, do we win and move on to different, you know, playoffs or not? So some of it can't be accounted for, you know, cafeteria if they end up working, you know, extra, transportation, the same thing. So things like that I can't really predict, but I know right now we're covering about 908,000 from the revolvings. And I think we already answered the next question about Title I.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So utilities, unless there's anything on that. All right, utilities.
So we've been watching utilities, in some months they go up and some months, I shouldn't say go up. Some months they're less than the year before and some months they're more. And it's kind of awkward to watch because kilowatts may go down, but price may go up. So I mean, that's why I report it monthly so everyone can see where we're at. Our other utilities like our water, our trash, we are barely used. So overall, the utility budget doesn't see a deficit because it balances out. If, you know, if the gas is a little bit higher, but the electric's a little bit lower, and then they said the sewer, the water, that's very minimal. So we don't have any really concerns about utilities in the means of increasing our budget.
This may be a silly question, but the new program that Cohasset has out there, in terms of electric, I would assume the schools can be part of that.
I would assume, yes.
Okay, so that
The
should
the
provide some
aggregation?
savings. Yes,
I would check into it. I don't know because it's a residential, I believe it's a residential program.
Okay, that was my-
There's a
Okay.
business element, so we should look into,
yeah,
Okay,
I assume that there was I know everyone got a communication. I assume we got one at the schools, but if we haven't, let's see what we have to do. But the default is to move into it, but the deal is not as good for businesses. So I don't know if there's a different deal for the actual administrative buildings of the school.
even if it just holds the rate steady, it I mean, effectively goes down for whatever the criteria is for businesses as opposed to residential, it'd be worth checking out for sure.
That's on my list to inquire about tomorrow as
Okay.
well. So I did assume we would be part of that in some way.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Ellen G, okay, let's move on.
so in
Okay.
transportation, so I did a comparison to date. So 131 in FY22, we had spent about $140,000. Currently, we spent about 107. Part of that explanation is we have not had enough drivers. So our current drivers have been doubling up, probably almost for the whole year up till this week. So the same driver isn't making any more money. She's just doing 2 routes at a time.
Okay, I was gonna ask you guys about that, where I think I caught the tail end of a conversation about that hiring challenge at one of the school committee meetings.
We are still battling it, but for right now through June, I believe we have a good fix. So hopefully we don't see any more of those changes. We have 2 backup drivers right now, so at least if 2 people are out, we have it covered. If a third is out,
Yeah.
then we'll be back to doubling up a route.
It's actually the first time since the pandemic that we are in a stable position. We should be good, knock on wood, unless something drastic changes. I should say.
That's great news.
Yes.
And I should probably know the answer to this question, but is there any news on where we can park our buses?
So we're working through that with capital.
Okay.
There isn't, the hope right now and the ask is that we are able to create a lot up on the, as you kind of moving through the Deer Hill Osgood driveway.
Okay, yeah, that was
on
the
the left.
conversation.
As you're sort of, if you're driving up the driveway, I should say down towards Osgood, it would be on your left, the opposite side from where the Deer Hill School is.
Okay,
And that is enough of a parcel of land that it should be able to park 9 to 10 buses and then some additional spots as well. And perhaps if it works, have some sort of mobile facility there for drivers. So we're hopeful and certainly asking for support with that from capital.
okay. Any other questions, guys?
No,
Okay, great.
Okay, so then we get into some of the staffing and you're correct in your supposition. Some of the requests or almost all of them have some tie to our MCAS action plan and the needs we're seeing with our students from a data perspective, particularly in learning. We've done a lot over the last few years of supplementing our social emotional needs of our students and adding counselors and such. And we feel we're better outfitted for that. And now we're, obviously have seen the first swath of data that tells us where our students are in terms of their academics and particularly early numeracy and literacy and how that might move up the levels in terms of schooling as we go. So I'll lean a little bit on Leslie, Dr. Collins, to help with some of this, but the questions were really about adding some further insight into these budget requests, and then specifically a few of the positions that were asked for and how that might help struggling students. And as has been the case, I would say pre-pandemic, and I think that perhaps Jean and Ellen would agree, that our math scores were not where we wanted them, particularly in building up to 10th grade. The scores that were in our elementary and then in our middle school, we have seen some growth in our middle school scores, which is good. And again, there are some trends that we saw though throughout our district that were right in tune with what's happening in other districts, but just not acceptable from the point of view that we need to help our kids out and really help any issues that they were having in learning, particularly in the early numeracy and literacy areas. So Leslie, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the specific questions. First of all, one of the specific questions was about talking about Bridges math, and maybe Leslie, you could talk a little bit about when we implemented Bridges, and then the question was, are we seeing any growth? How are we doing on it? And there's a chart here just sort of
Right.
for your reference.
So this is just based on MCAS scores from this past year for 2022. But if you look back, it's a little historical for 19 and also 21. What the state did was really look at the 2019 scores pre-pandemic and then really look at the 22, kind of see the dip that happened in 21, and it wasn't even a typical assessment. It was a shorter assessment to then back to 22 where we had a full assessment as if it were the same as 2019. And in the state, there was a positive trend, as you can see, up 6%. So if you look across the state, which is that first gray number where it says Massachusetts 3 through 8, we started higher. Of course, they were at 49% of meeting and exceeding expectations. That's what that M and that E is on the very top. If you look across the top of the yellow, and we were solid at 60%. Dip in 21, we went into the 40s, but you can see that we rebounded. And if you look at our 3 through 5, we actually look at that percentage of 61%, meeting and exceeding expectations. So we not only are, and I would attribute this to Bridges and all our work with the Math Center during the pandemic, because in reality, when we were looking at the curriculum, we worked with the math center, who is Bridges, and they had us teach certain things and not teach other pieces because they knew they were going to be taught somewhere else. So even if you look at our results from 2021, when we look at them, they did well exactly where we taught them and where we knew that they weren't going to do as well, but we knew we were going to catch them up on it. So it was okay because because math spirals. And so we knew that it was going to be okay. And it certainly is. So we're happy with those trends. And I think as we're looking at our math this year across K through 12, we're able to kind of see about what we need to do to even do better. So we're using this data point here, but we have iReady data, which is a diagnostic we're using for kindergarten through 8th grade. We implemented that last year. And so that's giving us some nice data, and it does line up nicely with the MCAS. They're kind of different, but they are still a moment in time of an assessment. So we are happy with that. Any questions about that part of it?
I
No,
do.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jean.
I'm just curious, in my time, I've seen 4 different math programs that were supposed to make all the difference. We went from thinking that spiraling was the way, and then we changed to mastery, and it now sounds like we're doing spiraling again. Does Bridges do spiraling?
I just want to jump in. I want to make sure we're focused on the budget. These are the kind of questions we raise at school committee.
And it is a
Um,
budget question because every time we change, there's a cost involved. That's all I'm curious
Yeah,
about.
it is mastery, Jean. It's a great question, but it's still one of the things that is that Bridges has that other programs don't have. It's something called a number corner. And number corner is an additional time that is spent on math, and it goes over, it introduces and or reinforces
Okay,
different things. So
sure.
that's great. That's actually a really good question.
Thank you. I
So
get
I
that.
think we do both. How's that? It's a little bit of both.
And just one more little question
Yeah.
related to this. So when you chose that program, did you speak to other districts who were seeing good results?
Yes.
Or
Yes, it was strong. Yes, it was. And I have to say, I actually started the day that the vendors were showing the programming. So a lot of legwork had already been done by Dr. Sullivan and the committee at the time.
Yeah, we had broken it down. We had broken it down to 3 or 4 programs that we were going to be looking at, and then we talked to districts that had used it. We had our math specialists go out and visit places, come back, and who were using all the various programs, and come back and talk to our staff. And it was really chosen, and we get a good indication of what the community wanted too. And it was really chosen with all those things in mind, and put into place. And I gotta tell you, it wasn't the easiest program to put into place. It's an intensive program, but it provides a lot for the students. But from a teaching point of view, it's a lot of work. So, we didn't take the easy path, that's for sure.
okay,
Ellen, do you have a question? I'm sorry, I see your hand.
I was just going to comment that we piloted Bridges with another program for, I don't know if it was a semester or a whole year,
Yeah,
in mirroring classrooms. And it
We
was
did.
really the outcomes of the students and the teaching and the instruction, the ability for the teachers to instruct and use the program. And that was a big decision in how Bridges was selected.
was Bridges and Investigations was the other program that we were really looking at. And some of the components of Bridges that put them over the edge included the number corner, if I'm correct there. That was a big
That is
part of it. And the fidelity in the use of that is very impressive. Pre-K through 6, we've been seeing through 5, I should say. We've been seeing that in our learning walks. So it's been great. So I agree. I'm really hopeful. I think all of these are definite signs that this is going to take hold and make a difference. The other question that was engaged here was about the grade 6 math teacher, because as you all saw, we did ask for an additional grade 6 math teacher. And we make the point in the presentation that it reduces class sizes. And the question that was asked, and it's a good one, is how will that help struggling students? And I'll let Dr. Collins answer it, but you can see sort of what we wrote here. Really, it's not just struggling students. The idea is to help provide the ability for more differentiated and personalized instruction within the classrooms. We did add a math specialist to the middle school last year. And that's been very helpful, and we can see that taking hold. But go ahead, Dr. Collins. I didn't want to steal your thunder, although I kind of stole the answer, didn't I? But go
You
ahead.
did, but that's okay. I know, but I think that you bring up the point about differentiation and personalized instruction, but the most important really is that we want to have a very strong tier 1 or universal level. And so by adding that additional teacher, it allows for a stronger tier 1 for all students, right? So that helps our students that are struggling, but it also supports our students that meet additional challenges. And Mr. Mills did this by this past year this current year that we're in. He has an additional ELA teacher, and he has seen great growth and in all students, and in particular, really making sure that all students are getting what they need. And coming out of the pandemic, there are so many more issues than we've had before. So being able to attack where kids are at, because they are coming in different places, even though they all were here with us, they were all going through the pandemic together. We don't necessarily know what their ability to access the curriculum was, because we don't know where they were social emotionally, if that makes sense to you. Some kids could grab it right away. Other students were responsible for a lot of things at home, or parents weren't able to get them onto the classroom like they needed to be. So there's just a lot of different things that children experienced. So we really want to make sure that we are there to support them as best as possible. So that small group instruction is really important. Middle school is a big shift. It's hard for them in the best of times. So we just want to be prepared and make sure that we're giving our kids exactly what they need.
I have an unplanned question. I apologize. Are any grade 6 math classes co-taught?
Oh, Helen, there's definitely some co-taught, and I'm going to say,
Grade 6? I don't believe so.
no, is it grades? I'm not sure, Ellen. I'm sorry, I'm trying to look and see in my head, but I can't, I can find that out though.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering if the success of co-taught classrooms that we saw when we implemented them, and I would assume you're still having success, that students of all abilities benefit from a co-taught classroom,
They do.
that maybe, and I know I'm outside my lane, like Lance, sorry, but maybe that's another option as opposed to a separate classroom.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a possibility. You're still looking at a special education
It's-
teacher, You're still looking at a teacher though.
At
You know,
another body.
Still could be. Yeah, that's a good thought though.
I mean, something that I know we asked you to break this out kind of by school when you were doing this, but it is interesting looking at the budget and the staffing requests. It is very math centric.
Mhm.
So I think that's an important part of your story going forward so that obviously people are looking school by school and adding staff, but telling that story and why would be important too, to look at that a little more holistically, I think.
Yeah, we're also going pretty full bore with our early literacy too. We're working to create a new process of really teaching reading and literacy, early literacy. Working.
Well, I didn't mean to throw shade on any other subject.
No, I understand.
That was not my point.
No, I know that. But I was clumsily making the point that we have hired reading specialists as well. And it just, the way things are shifting now, and what the data is telling us is that our math scores are just not, they just weren't good. There's no sugarcoating it. We need to do better with that. And so
Okay.
we're really, as a leadership team, looking for ways to improve them.
Great. Are we good, guys?
Yeah, I would just commend you all, because the math scores that on the slide before you bounce back to pre-pandemic levels. Now, maybe that's not where you want them to be,
Right.
but you bounce back, and I would venture to say probably quicker, obviously quicker than the state, and probably quicker than some peer districts. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if we move down,
Mhm.
there's a question about, this is a good question.
Yes.
Not that the other questions weren't, but this is,
Oh, good question.
we expected this question because it's, current grade 2 is 6 sections, 107 students for an average of 18. 5 sections of grade 3 with 107 is a 21 average. So the idea is that we're trying to create grade 3 to have the same sections of teachers as we have in grade 2. And the question is really, are you going to get sort of your bang for the buck for that slight reduction in class numbers? We're really focusing on that grade level as they kind of move through because of their positioning in the pandemic and the fact that they are in need of support. We know that coming behind them is a much larger class where we would have to add a grade 3 section anyway. If I went back to our numbers, I believe it's in the 120s. So what we're hoping to do is to provide this group with as much support as possible so that when we get to the next year, we won't have to add a teacher in 4th grade because we already have those sections, correct, Dr. Scollins?
Correct.
But we're trying to help 2 grade levels with the thought that we know the grade level that comes into 3rd grade, not this coming year, but the year after, would have to add a section anyway. And the needs are profound in both of those groups because of the pandemic. So we're just making a commitment to that group of kids to provide them with a small group setting and as much diversity and personalized learning as possible, knowing full well that maybe in a different climate and a different atmosphere, we wouldn't ask for that because of the raw numbers and what the numbers say.
Yeah, the current grade 2 and current grade 3. To Dr. Sullivan's point, they have more need because of where they were academically during the pandemic.
Mhm.
And then as for ESPs, so they're based on the student need and what the service delivery is for those students. So it's not like there's an ESP that's just in a 3rd grade classroom. They're connected to whatever services are needed. So they may not even need actually be in the class the whole day. They may all, if they only have students that need math support or they need reading support, then they're in and out. So I couldn't really answer your question specifically, but if you have maybe more clarity about what you wanted to know about grade.
No, Leslie, I couldn't remember. I
Yeah.
know like in kindergarten, we have one in every classroom, just
Correct, kindergarten does.
honestly, I just couldn't remember through how many elementary grades did we kind of have that model?
Yeah, so it's really
Kindergarten.
only kindergarten.
Okay,
So after that, it's really based on what's the need of the students in that particular classroom.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and pretty much other than kindergarten and our, we do have library and technology ESPs, other than those folks, everyone else is based on special education need. Instructional aids. Okay, moving forward. Question about retirements. I think we answered that right
Yep,
now.
already did.
2, possibly 3. And then we've looked at this. We don't really feel we have staffing flexibility based on our needs to utilize our current new hires to cover the anticipated openings. But if there were specific thoughts around that, it would be interesting to hear them. But
Jean, I think that was your question. Did you want to add any color to that?
I don't recall that being my question.
Oh,
it's one of those questions that's
Just
interesting
looking up.
because it's appealing if there was a thought that followed it, because we're always trying to be creative and think outside the box, but we were struggling to figure out how we would make that work.
Yeah, I did ask how many retirements were anticipated
Okay.
and how that money might be used, but
They're both very fair questions, so I'm not trying to say. The next one was about COVID funds. We really have no remaining ESSER funds left, and if this was a question, it could very well have been about, there are leftover COVID funds from some districts. We are not one of those districts. We used every penny of our COVID funds, and it doesn't appear that we're in line to get anything additional either.
And we actually at the school committee's recommendation, we reached out to DESI to say, we know there's all these unclaimed ESSER funds. Is there any thought of divvying them up to the districts that want the money? And the answer was no. It was worth a shot.
And the last question here is also a very fair one. It's just that I think it's premature because it's not a premature question. It's premature for us to answer.
I
Only
didn't
because-
expect you to answer it, but I
a
mean,
good
because you
question.
haven't even sat down with Chris and Jennifer yet either, but I just,
No.
that will be a question. So it was, and that'd be a question.
Yeah, that
Um,
comes up.
So,
So yep, it's fair.
all right, Jean, Ellen, anything else that struck your fancy, Jean?
just one quick question. Do you have any idea when you actually will know what the town's number is for the schools? Do you have a meeting scheduled with Chris?
We do have a scheduled meeting tomorrow. I don't
Tomorrow.
know if tomorrow is when we'll get an idea of, we'll probably I'm guessing we might get an idea of some of the disposition of where the town stands, but we might not get an actual number. But we might, I don't know. And this also is sort of our, I've met Miss Mullen just in passing, but not, this is sort of our first meeting with her in terms of a operational budget deep dive. So it's possible, but maybe tomorrow.
Okay, great.
Great.
I cannot thank you guys enough. I know this is meeting season, and I really appreciate it, but rest assured, this will save us lots of time in the coming
Definitely.
weeks. It really will. So appreciate your time. And again, Patrick, if you wouldn't mind just sending along the document with the answers, that would be great.
Sure will. I'm
And-
going to correct that error for the high school enrollment and I'll send it over.
And do
Okay,
you-
and
do you want us to add the other things in, Mary, before we send it off, or do you want us to send this and then send you the additional? Because there were just a couple of places where you had questions.
yeah, there were just a couple questions. I think definitely include the 6 ESPs or that are not coming back for whatever reason.
Would it be okay if we send it tomorrow then? Because I want to make sure.
No, Patrick, I want it in 5 minutes. Yes, you can send
Well,
it
I could send it
tomorrow.
to you in 5 minutes.
He's
My
very
God.
responsive.
Stay
Oh,
after
yeah.
school.
No, absolutely.
Okay, we'll send it, because then we'll make sure we get it all accurate.
That way we can talk tomorrow, yeah.
You
But-
guys have any questions for us?
Yeah,
Yeah.
good question.
I'll more of a request than a question. So, I appreciate you guys taking the attention to do this. And as you can see, we've got some, and from experience, we've got some challenges with our schools, and we need to make sure we've given our kids the things that they need. And especially in academics, we're really trying to bolster that up. So if there are elements in our story that you think we could better convey, because, we see it every other week at school committee meetings. These guys see it every day when they're dealing with the schools. So, if there are ways that we can make our story more compelling to get the resources we need for our schools from the town, welcome any input you might have. You guys have a lot of relevant experience and can help us through this process. So I know you're the subcommittee, the advisory committee that advises select, but if you have advice for us too, we'll also take that.
Duly noted. So.
So I know we all
um,
have the same goals here, is to have good experience for all of our little ones in the town. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
Definitely. And I would definitely follow up when you meet with Chris and Jen about the Municipal Modernization Act and make sure that we're following those rules, because you don't want to get called out on that for the sped stabilization
Mhm.
fund versus a revolving fund, because I'm on the same, excuse me, I'm on the same route that Ellen is. They're so specific, and you don't want to jeopardize those funds or the ability to reserve those funds.
And it's not DESI, it's Mass,
No.
law. So
Right.
it's very, very different than a DESI policy.
Right.
And I mean, the funds are staying, I shouldn't say staying. The stabilization fund is still in existence with the
Right.
funding in it. It was just a matter of, do I pay it directly out of that fund? How do I get the tuition bill that we needed to pay paid? And that was the result of, she put it into a revolving, whereas last year Dawn put it right into the budget. So
Okay.
we're not,
So-
she's
so
not
it's-
taking away the stabilization fund in any way.
Right. So it's a mechanism for payment as
Yes.
opposed to a checking account to be drawn
Yes.
against.
Yes.
It's kind of the same,
Yes.
I'm saying the same thing, but
No, that's true. And that's where it was like, okay, not really sure where that lands. If it's, we're still accounting for it within the sped stabilization fund. It's just a matter of process of paying it. Does it come directly, or is it possible to come directly out of that account? Or does it go straight into the budget as a deposit? Or does it go into a revolving account and we just pay it out of that? And now there's zero left in that revolving account. But I'll definitely pull up the policy tomorrow and bring it with me just to make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
All
I
right,
think
I
this
really
is a good
appreciate it. Yes, Jean.
My biggest point, though, is what we spoke about earlier about not making it look like we're hiring 24 people or 22 people. That we're reusing resources
Mhm.
to cover those needs. Because I'll tell you right now, if you walk in and say, oh yeah, we need 11 here and 11 and a half here, it looks like 22. So you have to make sure that your messaging is correct.
That's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Sue, to that, and it may be interesting, I often ask about human beings, and actual human beings. So, putting it in terms of FTEs and human beings might also bring that forward because that's a relevant data point.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, thank you.
Go have dinner.
Great.
All right.
Okay,
Right.
Night, guys.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
you.
Right.